My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and
plus
beer.
years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Hey, community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. You know, today's episode, I'm really excited. One of the best things about dispatching in today's world is the technology we have available to us. You know, we're not using map books anymore. Manual mode is feared. It is not the normal day-to-day operations in our comm center, and we can map our units. We have better technology to map our callers, and all of this technology is just equal to create better outcomes when we are trying to save lives. My guest today, CEO of Smart Response Technologies, is here to talk about their company and some technology that's probably been around for a while, but we're just starting to hear more about it today in the everyday world, and that is assistive AI. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this technology can benefit us in our centers and, again, increase our chances in saving more lives. My guest today is Roger Mann, and I'm going to bring them on now. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Ashley. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited, really thrilled to be with you.
Gosh, I'm so excited too. And it's funny because I'm sure everyone assumes, but no one really knows. You know, I talk with folks before we hit the record button, and me and you are already going on a tangent about this technology and what it can do in our centers. And I'm just so excited to be able to talk to you about it and maybe ease some people's minds about a new technology that they might see in their centers in the very near future.
Indeed. I thought about what I can do in my modest way to contribute to your mission with all of your audience. And just like you said, just to get people a little bit more acclimated about assistive AI is, I think, going to be really worthwhile today.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with working in public safety. What is your journey like?
Sure. So I got involved in public safety through my job at Lockheed Martin, where I was running the research and development programs for international public safety opportunities and solutions. And I participated, was one of the founders of a working group within the Open Geospatial Consortium called the Law Enforcement and Public Safety Working Group. And we had members from all over the world, both practitioners like yourself, and then leading information technology companies. And you mentioned map books as you were opening up. And one of the things that, given the name of the Open Geospatial Consortium, is very location-based, service-oriented. And so I got to see, state of the art for that all over the world, and, a lot here in the United States. And working with those practitioners really exposed me to the challenges that they're facing. And I'm trained as a signal processing electrical engineer, and then I was a submariner in the Navy. And so I always had a hankering to apply more on the voice signal processing towards the problems that I started getting exposed to about 10 years ago. And then, right after departing Lockheed, I also had the itch to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And one of my former colleagues introduced me to Air Force Research Labs, who had a human performance wing, and they were working on voice AI. And so I thought, I think I know some problems over here that could use that technology. And so that's when the journey began in terms of bringing trotting this type of technology out to those public safety challenges and forming the company. I'll also mention that one of my colleagues and I at Smart Response got very, very much involved in the IGES Institute. I want to give them a shout out. They are an alliance partner with NINA and APCO,
Okay.
and they formed with some really, really good folks, including people like Bob Finney and Brad Flanagan, Eddie Reyes, a group called the Emergency Communications and Response Group. So that was another lens for me to learn a lot more and get more involved in the public safety challenges more directly through the IGES Institute.
Awesome. So, I always find it so interesting about like how many things are out there, like working in the background to push things forward that ultimately trickle down to like me in a dispatch center that I've never heard of before. You know what I mean? Like there's all these boards, these people who are joining together with all this education and lived experience. And ultimately it trickles down into our comm centers, making our jobs so much easier to do.
I'd go even a step further that says, the most important thing as the driver is your comm centers, your culture, your experiences, and what you do day in and day out. And that really needs to be amplified towards all of the other contributing stakeholders, including industry and like you say, these professional 911 organizations that are committed to really supporting. I think they fit the piece of your mission you call support, quite nicely. And you're right, it's a big world out there of well-meaning, very experienced, talented folks with energy that can join, forces in this movement with what you're doing.
Yeah. I don't know if it's Marvel or DC, and I know people are yelling at me right now. It's like when everybody unites. That's what I feel like is happening in the background.
I'm with you there.
So tell us a little bit about Smart Response and what you folks are doing down there, and how you took all this experience and kind of geared it towards your true passion and education, and how you got into public safety.
Yeah, well, Smart Response at its core is an emergency communications, I'll call it even obsessed company. One of those problems we saw was miscommunication. And so every one of us were an employee owned, which is a wonderful place to be, where everyone, shares and has the same convictions and culture towards, growing as a company. And then we're also bringing in some investors that have affinities, and they're kind of like the picture perfect investor because they have folks that have been, fire chiefs in New York City or in 911 centers, and so that's contributing to or fueling really our ability to bring our technology, and the technology that's at the heart, and it segues into assistive AI, is a efficiency gainer for communications that's really unique out there in the marketplace, where that assistive technology, if you think about, like, if you were doing any workflow, and I know quality has become a big part of the 911 practicing QA, you got to have it. And if you think about, what's your objective, and Lockheed, we did a lot of what's called total quality management process. And so you're trying to get errors out as you move down to get your outcomes. And so really this assistive AI is just that. It's a aid to those amazing people like yourself that are on the floor, helping those victims in distress, working with the public, so that the miscommunications are reduced, which makes you much more efficient and effective in the outcomes that you're getting. And that's really all we focus on. There's all kinds of other technologies out there. We are cloud hosted, so we're adept at all those cloud technologies. We're CJIS certified, certified by Virginia State Police, compliant from, using the right language there of all the policies that come out of the FBI. and so that's an important part of who we are, is recognizing that the end mission's not, you must, every one of us in our company is level 4 CGIS, certified. And you have to be, because as a company, while we have, this skill to bring assistive AI to eradicate that miscommunications, you have to know the environments you're working in, what the importance of protecting information and privacy, and all of those things are part of us being a competent, subscription supplier of those services. And to give your listeners a little bit of sense, we're 17 months young.
Hey.
And we have customers in 8 states, which we're very happy and blessed, because these are the people we deliberately sought, much like you, prime movers across the country. So that's why you won't find us like in one geography. We're literally all over the country. And that was by design, because we found people that were part of this big movement across the 911 leadership to say, we can bring assistive technology to make our people better enabled, more empowered to do a more effective job, and to be less stressed at the same time. So we're kind of excited about that. I'll toss out, a couple of names here of some of these change leaders, and most of your audience will have probably known them well before I did. But take Brett Loeb and Brad Flanagan in Pitkin County, Colorado. Take Bob Finney in Collier County, Florida. Daniel Hartman in Salem, Virginia. You can take Garrett Klein in Moses Lake, Washington. And then there's several others. I don't want to leave people out, but all of these people saw, like you do, as someone that wants to empower and attract and retain more talent in the 911 centers, the benefits of our service. And I want to ask you a question, Ashley. Did you?
Hit me.
I think you told me you went to Grapevine, Nina.
I did go to Nina. I was a whirlwind, let me tell you.
Did you catch Brad Flanagan's keynote pitch?
I did not catch the keynote, and unfortunately, because that was the first time I've done a booth at Nina, and my stress level was high. I didn't get a chance to go to the keynote.
Shoot, but please, that leads to a whole nother thing about running a business and how you live, sleep, breathe. Like, I don't even know how you have the stamina. You must have a very deep reservoir, because to do what you do, in your shifts, and the intensity of that and energy you have to apply that, and then to run a business.
Yeah.
Hats off
we
to you
all
there.
have to be a little bit crazy to be in this line of work, I think. And I just think that's what it comes down to. I got enough of the crazy to get through backgrounds and do this.
Well, the reason I was asking you whether you got a chance to catch Brad is because, and I just pick him as one, self-prescribed, and everyone will vouch disruptor, right? And it kind of goes back to your question about kind of who we are as far as why we exist.
Yeah.
And when Brett Loeb there and Brad first got a demonstration of what our technology, they literally hugged us, in the sense that we've been trying to do something. We knew we had this problem, but you actually built something that works and does what we were trying. and so with that background, at the keynote, Brad made mention that there was some assistive AI technology, and he asked the audience the question, like, how many of you, and I'll ask you the same question, have had circumstance where you're passively listening to multiple channels while you're actively, dispatching, and whether you ever missed anything when you were doing that. So I'll ask you that question, Ashley.
Yes. Simply yes. And I feel like there's a lot of dispatchers out there who might not want to say yes to that. But I think it all comes down to the fact that we are humans, and our ability to multitask, even though we pride ourselves of having that split ear that radio ear, being able to maneuver multiple. We're still human. And the idea that I can work one radio channel, take a traffic stop, take a license plate, take a person history that they're trying to run out, and then have a 911 phone ringing because it's only me and my partner in here. And now there's 6 911 ringing because it's a huge accident with the vehicle flip over. And then if you even want to take it to a whole nother level, we can hear our neighboring counties channels. And it happens not when everything's quiet. Sorry for everyone listening at work. Didn't mean to say the word, but it happens not.
That's a jinx there.
Right. While all that nonsense is happening, you have your sister county that's going pursuit into your city, and you hear them on the radio, and they're about to call you and let you know and ask for assistance, and all that's happening at one time. And there is an expectation that you hear it all. And the reality is that you will miss something. And
it gets right back to your point. It's like we are all human, no matter how good our radio ear is, no matter how focused we are, no matter how well trained we are, which is like a huge component, because you're not going to get good results if you don't have those building blocks. But even with that, when so much stuff is coming at you, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be, an escalating incident. It could be a more routine thing, but you missed it too because you were, multitasking.
Oh, I have $1 for every time I go, what did they say?
Say again.
This is group dispatching where he said what? They're like traffic stop. You're like, oh, okay.
No, that's spot on. I was in a center. I guess it was around the 4th of July timeframe, and the center team, the director there, as well as some other supervisors and dispatchers, were kicking some things around with us, and they said, we've had several instances now that we've used this technology, like wow. I didn't, it ranged from missing a license plate, running a plate, to when someone went in and out of service, to there's just countless day in and day out examples. And then they say, we even had a couple times where someone came in after their shift out in the field and said, you never acknowledged this. And they say, well, you never said it. And now they say, well, let's go back and look. And they never said it.
It's so funny because, and I know folks who are currently dispatching know this, and folks who are listening who might not have gotten into the job yet or haven't gone through training yet. When officers key up, sometimes their radio traffic isn't clear, right? But then you listen to the playback and it's clearer on the playback, but you still can't quite catch it. And you're just like, you didn't sound like that when it came out live. And there's a constant I need you to repeat that. And then the officer's repeating it, and they're possibly in a high stress situation and trying to, so it's a lot of officer safety thing where it's important to be clear the first time in case you can't get it out the second time. And again, we're all human. We're all working on technology, and technology, unfortunately, does fail sometimes. So
you spurred something I want to run down a little bit with you.
Let's do
it. When I was at Colorado's Nina NAPCO, I was talking with Jennifer Kirkland, and almost like a cosmic ray thing, where I was like, with our technology, APCO or NINA or both of them could introduce some sort of standard on intelligibility. And I think, I have nephews that are in law enforcement, both in sheriff's offices and police departments. And I was asking them, okay, in your academy, in your training, and your requals, how much time do you spend learning to speak properly into a radio? And they're like, huh? Pretty much not.
The people in the back here.
And I said, so with Jennifer, I was saying, and it might have even been her idea, and I just glommed onto it, but it's like, what if you introduced a standard, and not in a punitive sense, because it's all about we're working together, but that says, okay, just like when you qualify on your weapon, you also, talk into the radio. And we have a technology that can tell you objectively how intelligible you are when you talk into radio.
So
anyway, that's a bit of a little dirt road there, but I think there's something to that.
Yes.
And is that you've probably heard these jokes many times, and now I have in the centers I've been to, but they'll have this debate in front of me, and kind of a joke, but always truth in jokes. They'll say, okay, which is more difficult to make out? Is it the firefighter in the structure fire in the SCABA, or is it the police officer on a foot chase talking into his shoulder mic? And I've heard that same debate like multiple times all over the country. And then I've heard like a third chime in that says, well, actually, it's neither of those. It's the mumbler. It's like no matter what they're talking.
That's hilarious. And it is funny. And it's all, you can even throw like the canine officer pursuit with the dog barking in the background. You're like,
oh my,
I don't know which officer I'm talking to, the canine unit or its handler, because you're here.
Gotta learn to speak whatever that canine speak, because they might have some valuable information.
I mean, put Trigger on the phone. I don't know what his name is, but put him on there.
He's on it.
Yeah. But
No
it's
doubt,
so true.
no doubt.
I did evoc. What was called evoc training for. I ran the radio for our academy officers at my last agency a few times. We do like a nighttime thing. They go out there and we pretend there's like an officer down situation. I would start the trainee, and their job was to voice, I copy, responding code 3, the basic things that they do. And then they have to focus on, not getting hit by the imaginary fire truck that's coming to when they're responding, right? And it's so interesting when we talk about radio etiquette coming into our centers, because I remember like putting it out, like the officer comes out and they're being dramatic because they're training and they're like, I've been shot, officer down. And they're like trying to make it a real heightened training situation for the trainee. And then I voice, what Adam 23 to start, code 3, this location. And then there's like silence. And I'm like, are they going? Do they acknowledge me? And then all of a sudden they come up, like someone hit them on the side and was like, hey, that's you. And you're like, oh, we're responding code 3, and then you're like, they're supposed to give certain like updates, and there's like crickets. And like as a dispatcher in the real world, like we're supposed to kind of like, okay, like what's your road conditions? What's your this? What's your that? But it just goes to show you probably how much radio training they had prior to this scenario they're in. It's like, we taught you to drive, but now your lifeline really is this radio and being able to use it properly.
And that makes me think, I want to loop back a little bit on our company too, because we have one of my co-founders, Tim Shaw, he had 18 years FBI SWAT experience and a variety of other things that were pertinent. And then the other is our chief technology officer, Ed Craig. And Ed he's in his 24th year as a volunteer fire and rescue's assistant chief in Prince William County, Virginia. And they've told me countless examples like you were just sharing. And a good one, and you mentioned it earlier too, is like the whole say again scenario, and just how much that's tying up. Like when you're in like a really critical, you want to minimize that traffic, as more than I do. And then both of them will tell me it's very fascinating. This is a human nature thing again. When somebody wants to start describing something and they just start going on and on and on, like they're having a podcast instead of like they're in a, like, this is a command and control thing.
Yeah.
And where that gets right back to, you know, our ethos and eradicating miscommunications. It's not just that you're clarifying things that might have been hard to understand when they said it, but you're also, you know, eliminating a lot of say agains, which ties everybody else up. And a good example is like running a license plate. Like we transcribe that, bang. It's like, okay, I can cut and paste that into my, you know, into my dispatch or into my lookout, you know, be on the look, you know, whatever databases you're running the plates on, instead of saying, I didn't get it. And, you know, that gets also to, you know, the phonetics of numbers. And I know that's another big thing that you've talked about in your podcast and in your training. But I just wanted to loop back because that helps our company when we have folks. I've done ride-alongs and, you know, those sorts of things, but there's no substitute for doing it, like actually doing the job.
And I would also say is that, you know, there's a natural tension between patrol and or units in the field and dispatch. You know, you can't do my job, I can't do your job, all mostly in good fun. But I would imagine that taking away the, or lessening, I should say, that the 1099ing, the asking folks to repeat is going to help strengthen the relationship between the people in the field and the people in the dispatch centers, because it takes away this like, they didn't hear me, like they can't do their job. It just kind of takes away this little like annoyance that can build, especially on a hectic day, between folks in the field and folks in the dispatch centers.
Amen to that. The whole notion that you are a team. And the other thing that really struck me, the more I delved into 911 centers, and it's that everything begins there and must and it's like in anything, if you're building something and you didn't start it right, you can never get it to finish right.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's like, that's why, and I know there's a very strong and growing momentum that everybody I interact with believes in, along, you know, dispatchers being first responders. And it's so true. And there's an education of the public to that, and bodies that make those determinations in terms of what that means, and should be earning people for that function. But there is no doubt in my mind, from watching how things really work, that that's true and should be normative. Everybody should be like, yeah, that's right. Like, why'd you even ask that question?
Silly question. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're getting there. State by state. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I feel, a great time to be a dispatcher, in the sense of, you know, acknowledgement, in the sense of like, people are actually, we have TV shows that are showing what we're doing in the center. Like, these things weren't here 5-10 years ago, you know. We have like real TV shows, like reality shows, and then we have, you know, fiction shows that aren't always accurate with what we do, but people are still talking about the role of a dispatcher, and it's going into people's minds. And, you know, people are wondering, you know, what life is like for us out there in the world. You know, when they're watching Cops, they're understanding that the person speak, they can hear, is a dispatcher, where I think there was probably a big disconnect on how did we even get to the part where the folks have the cameras and we're out here in the patrol vehicles. Like, we're more talked about now, more in in everyone's peripherals and not straight line of view. And it's just such a good time to be getting into this part of the first responder field.
It is. I agree with you completely. It's an ideal time for that. One last thing I wanted to loop back with you. It's a question, and under your, you know, is there, you know, maybe this came up in previous Let's Talk Dispatch podcast, but Are you familiar with Project Mayday?
No.
So this is very fascinating, and I recommend it to your audience to just
Okay.
Google it. And the gentleman sadly passed away in October that originated this project out of Texas is Don Abbott.
Mm-hmm.
And what he had, where his obsession was Mayday projects, because he had been a fire chief and had experienced Maydays and the tragedies around him on the fire ground. And so what he did was over a 7-year period that ended right up until he passed in October of last year, he studied 5,000 Mayday incidents.
Wow.
What's pertinent to your audience is that one facet that he really drilled down in was the radio traffic. And so on those 5,000 Mayday incidents, this is going to probably startle you, but 36.5% of all those, the Mayday, as you know, said 3 times, was missed entirely by everyone on the fire ground, in the 911 center, anybody else. And then where it kind of inspired to what we do at Smart Response is and I liberally lifted a phrase that Don came up with called predictable is preventable. And how it relates is in that same painstaking, dissection of those radios, in 87% of those 5,000 Maydays, there was one of 16 phrases or a combination of those phrases said before the Mayday. And so those are great things for assistive technology to say, did you know they just said zero visibility, or they just said fires above me, or they said flash over or hoarder or whatever the phrase that was one of those 16.
Yeah.
And that's, doesn't mean for sure you're going to have a Mayday, but it just gets your attention.
Yeah. The patterns, when you do this job enough, and especially when you're working in a smaller agency and you tend to know your units, or even in a larger agency and you're working with the same units for a year or whatever your shift changes, you get to know cadence, you get to know the way they do things. And when it shifts, you notice and you peek up and you're like, well, they normally don't sound that escalated. Like something is going on that, they haven't put out, or I'm going to start paying a little more attention to it. And the other aspect of that study, which is daunting in general, is that for those 36% who didn't hear the Mayday, the trauma that's going to come with them and stay with them forever, because they're going to feel like they should have done better, could have done better. If I did hear it, what if blah, 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 blah.
I don't have the stat on this, but I know one of the findings from all that the Project Mayday, they also found that sometimes it was because the person was on the wrong radio talk group or something like that, where it's so it wasn't just that there's so much chaos or the muffledness or whatever it might have been, but I love your point, and I'm going to jot that point about the cadence down, because I think there can be we are working on some voice stress indicators on our technology roadmap.
Very cool.
And I think that would correlate to what you're saying, whether your pitch changes, whether your tempo changes. And you're right, that the word cadence is the operative word there. I was in Fort Worth, Texas, right after Nashville for APCO, and with their 911 leadership team. And one of them, like me, had been a submariner. He's actually the CTO of Fort Worth. And he asked me a question, which was, do you remember, like when you're on the sound power phone, you had like a fire in the engine room or something like that, how everybody's like, everything changed? And he goes, but the training and then the human ability to know, because you've trained so much, what they're supposed to be saying,
Yeah.
led you to take the next right step.
Mhm.
I was like, I do remember that.
Yeah,
And it did say,
heck yeah.
we had one where that came in for real. But anyway, it's a similar thing. And I think assistive AI will evolve towards, further helping. And that's the operative word here is it's helping. It's
Yeah.
the human being is so more advanced than any assistive AI
Yeah.
and a trained human being, even more so. That this is not a substitutive technology. This is assistive. And to your
Yeah, it's a
point
tool
on,
to the tool belt for sure.
yeah, it's just one of those.
So for folks who might not, because I told you before we jumped on here, I'm like AI, I'm like, it's like the new buzzword, like it's probably been around forever. And folks who are like in tech probably have been using AI in many different facets for a long time. But I think most recently we've seen it come up, especially for folks who have children and things like that. Using AI to, hey, write my essay, here's my prompt, things of that nature. So maybe for folks who don't have the best tech knowledge base, is there a plain way to describe assistive AI and how that relates to what we would see it being used for in the dispatch center?
Yes. So first, we've talked about some of the assistive features in identifying words and that sort of thing. But what's really underneath there is it's really statistics. It's really just processing information. In our case, the assistive is listening to your voice and it is using statistics to say, okay, that, in the English language, there's 42 utterances. It varies by language, but they're all in that same area. And we're doing some stuff in Spanish now as well.
Very cool.
And so it starts to say, well, if this utterance is followed by that utterance is followed by this utterance, then it's likely this word. And then there's also some things that are going on to say, in the vocabulary of public safety, there's a certain set of words that are really important. So I'm going to really train my model to weight those and get them more accurate. It's not as challenging. It has a different set of challenges in the acoustics and some other things, but in vocabulary, public safety can be less as it's trying to predict what's the most likely word that you just said. And it's the same thing you see when you're watching closed caption TV that's live, and you'll see there's like a 4-second delay. In our case, we've worked on technology to make it much faster than that because 4 seconds is too long for 911.
Anxiety would be up.
and it's really important to, like I was saying, to intensify those words. And then that assistive AI is running, and I'll throw out a couple buzzwords and I'll try to explain what they are. So you'll hear deep neural net, DNN. And so think about that as really a replica of how your brain works. Your brain matches patterns all the time in voice, in objects, and everything. And it's basically going through some layers of trying to fit that match and say, that's what I saw. That's what I heard. And that's what a deep neural net is doing.
Okay.
And today's compute environments, like we operate in a cloud hosted environment. And the beautiful thing is that in order to do those statistics I was talking about earlier and run up and down these layers of your neural net to make that match with the highest likelihood of being right, you need a lot of compute. And the beautiful thing is that is very abundant these days in the cloud. You may have heard about companies like NVIDIA that makes a graphics processing unit. That unit is one of the technical infrastructure enablements for doing this lightning fast pattern matching that deep, assistive AI is doing. Almost everything I said there can apply in other, like object recognition. And I know in 911 centers, some of that's emerging on video and so forth like that. It's doing the same thing I was talking about, but instead of parsing out, it's looking at pixels and image matching versus like utterances and word matching.
Yeah.
And so that's in essence, what's going on. And then the assistive nature we've kind of bantied about already is, well, to be assistive, you have to ask, what do you need assistance on? Like, what? So I don't want to, there's certain things you do quite, you don't want another screen, on another tab on a console. You just, so the assistance part is driven by the user experience and making it intuitive to them what they're getting assisted with. And so the assistance might be an alert on certain keywords that will persist for you. And that's an assistance to say, okay, I'll dismiss it. And maybe that gets pushed to a supervisor. Maybe it gets pushed to QA. One of the things we've heard that, and we heard this quite a bit just in Nashville from a lot of folks that came by our booth. And you know how crazy that gets in the booth. Man, that's wild. But several of the training managers, coordinators, and supervisors were saying, I can see the assistance here, relative to the learning curve without looking right over somebody's shoulder, which always makes a person nervous. Yeah, and say, I need some breathing room. There's some supervisory and training assistance there. So not only is it assistive, on the front lines of the workflow of dispatch, but it can be assistive to supervisors and trainers and that sort of thing, and kind of feed into the great movement of quality assurance as well. Because ask yourself I'll ask you, like, if, and you've probably done some of this, like, how do you pick which particular dispatches that you do a QA on? So you might use this as assistive technology. Say, like, I want to do the ones that have an escalation with these type of words, like take a good one, which pursuit. Like, I want to look at all the pursuits and how did we follow our procedures and our protocol, sort of thing. So that's another use case of assistive AI. Did I get to a fundamental? I can go a little further in describing the technology, or do you think your audience would follow?
No, I think that was a really good explanation. My follow-up question would be, what does your program look like when it's in the center? So if I'm in dispatch, I'm taking a radio, looking at all my screens, is it coming up like in its own little window tab, cloud-based, or like what is a dispatcher seeing when those alerts
what's that
are coming
experience
through? What is that?
Great question.
If you can describe it, what does that look like?
The way you experience our assistive AI is you every center can have keywords that are their own. So this, like, we have some default ones, like the Project Mayday and Pursuit, Shots Fired, and Code 1099, things like that. But every place might have certain place names that are unique to their locality, and they can choose, what those keywords are. And because it's phonetics, like I was talking about in the utterances, it doesn't even have to be a word in any dictionary, let alone the English dictionary.
And I would also imagine, like, I went from one agency to another, and like we all speak our own language. Like in Sacramento, we had 9 codes, and in Walnut Creek, we have 10 codes. So I had to learn a whole another language. Thanks, Sacramento. But I would imagine there's some of that pouring into.
Well, and you mentioned in one of your podcasts, or maybe one of your training things on the phonetic alphabet, and that can also be different, like the NATO standards different than and so that could be another one that's different for the assistive technology. But the experience, and we've worked a lot with some of our early customers, and then from the experience of some of our founders, to make this like one-click, simple, easy, intuitive. And what happens once you've got those things preloaded in, and we've seen it used a number of different ways. So sometimes it will be a console, a monitor right above where you decide where to put your radio channels, because
Okay.
they kind of relate to each other, like what's being transcribed and what. And it might be like a double decker on one side where
Yeah.
there's the radio channel assignment, and then there's our transcription.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of flexibility in the assistiveness, because you can take one channel and display it on your total console. You can have up to 8 radio talk groups on one browser, one console. You can organize it so I'll use the term interleave, so it goes, one talk group after another regardless, but it'll say which talk group's talking, and oftentimes we'll color code. The law enforcement is blue and fire and rescue is red, and so forth, in terms of just a visually intuitive, who's, what channel is, what talk group is assigned to, which, type of responder. And then there's both what's called a passive alert, which is, we call it a snack bar. It just kind of comes up and it does not persist. And that might be something that's like, okay. And then there's a little bell on the left that's keeps track of it. It's called a log. So it timestamps every one of those. And you can go see, like, anytime you might have a lull in the action, you can say, did I get any passive alerts? Because I might not have seen the passive alert.
Yeah.
But on critical words, such as a mayday or shots fired or officer down, those persist until you dismiss them. And you're still getting, you can immediately go at any time in our user experience, you can immediately go to a channel and replay. And so, this is instant. This isn't, 10 seconds later. This is right after it happened. You can instantly replay anything that you, and we also get displayed on smartphones, and we have a SMS message push. So if you used Teams, or some sheriff's office use HipLink, you can get a push. So you don't even have to be on our assistive tool to get a notification that a word that you wanted to be alerted on. So a good scenario example of that might be pursuit, where there's a policy that says, okay, we want to make sure that this pursuit's not going to put people at, in harm's way needlessly. It's a necessary pursuit. So that might go to, say, a district sergeant that says, okay, I authorize keep, staying after
come up. What's the want? Why are we chasing this person? Yeah.
As an example. So that's one set of user experiences. We've seen some of the centers that are using it will put it, and I'm going to tangent on you here again.
Please.
So some of them will put it, are you familiar? Do you use the term pods in the larger dispatch centers?
We have pods.
Yep. So they'll put it per pod in a larger above everybody console.
Everyone sees it.
And then someone can, like, line of sight see, oh, there's some alerts and that sort of thing. But the reason I was going to tangent on you, I failed to mention this when you asked me about a company, but and you appreciate this because you're really good at, branding Raspy Dispatcher and Let's Talk Dispatch and your taglines and stuff. Because the most intelligent communicating creature on the planet happens to be dolphins, and they operate in pods, we branded our product name as Delphini. And another dimension of that is that the dolphins they literally give their offspring a unique squeak, if that's the way. And so it's like a human name.
That was my nickname in college, because my voice was a little squeakier back then. So.
But anyway, I mentioned that because you got me thinking down that path with how the user experience is, and then I thought, well, we were inspired by dolphins and how well for both their own survival and safety and security of their pod. And so there's a similarity in the user experience here. What we want to what we want to enable and assist is for the pods and then the center writ large, and then going out further into the field, such that you're getting rid of that miscommunication. And so that's why we made the user experience very intuitive in those pop-ups and going to instant replay.
I do have a question. When you say
Sure.
replay, is the audio coming out as well as the caption when they replay, or are
Yes.
they very
Yeah.
cool?
So
Okay.
what happens is you'll see the caption. There's actually, like, normally it would be like right then, but there's also a search function if you wanted to go back a few minutes, 5 minutes, 2 hours, but it'll go right to those words.
Very
And you push the button and then you hear it again.
cool.
So
Okay.
sometimes
Yeah.
you might be like, did that's what they really like this? The
Mhm.
assist said they said this. Did they, and then the human really focuses in. And in most cases, it'll be, yep, that's what they said.
Yeah, and I mean,
Sometimes it will be wrong.
yeah, and it's so interesting because I guess the best place that I think about having to go back maybe farther is like a pursuit situation, because if for folks who don't work and haven't been in a pursuit situation yet, they're required, typically, I'm sure every agency's policy is different, but most officers, the second car is calling it and they're having to say speed, weather conditions, the flow of traffic, and things of that nature as the pursuit's continuing. So they're giving those updates, let alone, let's say people are throwing stuff out the car window, maybe one foot bails and the other continues. There's all these things that need to be documented in the call, because when they go back and write the report, they're referring to the CAD notes in order to, write the report for every instance that happens. So
Yeah.
sometimes there's so much going out, you might miss, they're throwing stuff and then they give an update about all the conditions. So we do sometimes have to go back and like type in the call at this time, thrown out at this location, stuff like that. So I was wondering if it came out audio as well.
Yeah, that's a great scenario, and there's lots of different branches from that scenario. But one of the other, back to your user experience question, another thing that was driven by, by us listening to what they were, how they wanted to use it, was every one of those, we call it a spurt, or, you could call it a snippet of, from the push to talk to the core, is time stamped. So you can cut and paste not only what was said, but like your example of maybe someone tossed a weapon out of their vehicle and they said that on the radio. You could go exactly to the second as to when they said that on the radio. And you could, paste that. We do something that's, if you're familiar with the incident command system, ICS 214 form, we can generate that as well, which, takes all of those things and then also puts a WAV file so you can see what the transcription said, but you can also play it back. And so you have kind of an after action type of logging thing there.
Perfect. Yeah. Very cool. And I would imagine, especially since you folks are like all over the place as far as what centers you're in across the country, is that all that information that's being poured into the system is only helping improve the system's ability to recognize different things that is pertinent to our line of work.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. That's a good, and by forethought, because it closes a loop I really should have mentioned when you asked me about AI, which what you're referring to there is machine learning. And the more data you have to train that vocabulary, that dialect, those place names, those things, the better it gets. And there's both unsupervised and supervised machine learning. We do both. And you're right. The more, that's how AI works. The more you train it, just like a human, the more you train a human, the more
So I don't know if
better
that's
they
a good thing for
perform.
us in the future or bad. The robots are going to take over, but
That'll
these will
be
be smart
a few
robots.
generations down the line, but yeah. But anyway, I wanted to follow up one other thing, which is assistive in nature, and I know you had expressed some interest when we were talking in advance about the radio ear and how this can help with
Mhm.
the radio ear.
Yeah.
And we've heard from multiple customers that they have found, particularly with, in both training, formal training regimens, moving towards being, qualified to be on the floor doing the dispatch function,
Mhm.
that by having real world radio transcriptions
Mhm.
in that training regimen, that the human, the trainee starts to be able to get the radio faster. We're going to run some experiments in the future to
That's exciting.
independently, objectively, scientifically prove that's true. But
Mhm.
anecdotally, we've heard that a number of times. And then the other part is, you know, on the floor when you're fairly. It reminds me, like in the Wayback Machine. I think. Well, I remember almost any time you learn how to do something that requires a license, like driving,
Mhm.
you're really unsafe when you first
Mm.
start driving.
Ain't that the truth?
And so I think similarly, even though you might be qualified, it's kind of nice to have some assistive radio ear technology
Heck yes. Mhm.
that is just like your buddy or your that's there for you, and I've heard some criticism, which has merit, but I think that there's more merit on what we're seeing
Mhm.
in terms of accelerating and reinforcing the radio ear. There has been some criticism that, well, this is going to be a crutch and they won't ever gain the radio ear.
You know
I
what?
haven't. Yeah,
Roger, let me tell you, I hate with a passion when folks are like, "We need to learn how to do this under rapid fire with the building on fire," people throwing stuff at you in your chair. I don't resonate with that line of thinking, and it's contagious in this field where folks are like, they should be able to do it without ABC, whatever ABC is. And I'm just like, why are we training in trauma? Why are we training someone when we have this technology to make this job, quote unquote, easier, an
yeah.
easier experience? Then like let's give them the crutch a little bit,
Well, and I also go back from a retention standpoint,
Yeah.
and with the next generation, like my children, like when they go to the workforce, they expect modern technology.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Heck
don't give me
yeah.
whatever you used to use when you were young.
Yeah, like, they're
Yeah,
like, "What are we talking? 2023, 2030?" Like, I can't even imagine dispatch in 10 years, let alone, what has come in 5 years. In 5 years that I've been doing this, text to 911 has come, rapid SOS, rapid deploy, all those systems are
great
now
stuff.
integrated
Yeah,
into our everyday line of work, and I remember my folks who have been doing this, like, being upset about it or being resistive, I should say, to those technologies. And now, 5 years in, those are just everyday technologies that we have. And I hope that that's what we get in the future with this AI stuff as well, is it just becomes our everyday line of
yeah.
work because it's only helping us.
Yeah, and the dimension we didn't, you might have touched on it, but we didn't talk in much length about it. But one of the other attributes of this assistive technology is it reduces your stress.
Mm,
And we
mhm,
know, so the Air Force research labs who invented this technology, they patented it, and we've got the license for it.
mhm,
They did some experiments where they measured, the comprehension increases, which can be like 70% comprehension increases. And then they also measured cognitive load decreases, which directly correlate to stress reduction. And those went down 50%. And so if you're like, okay, I'm not going to use this assistive technology because you need to do it the way we've always done it. And then you say, you're going to put unnecessary stress on somebody when the job's one of the hardest jobs, one of the toughest jobs in America already.
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing that?
Why?
It
doesn't make sense to me, And I've had folks, because, a lot of aspiring dispatchers or folks who are really early in their training, they reach out to me. And one of the things that folks ask me questions on and is how to, like, I'm missing big things in my calls. Like my trainer's listening, I'm in there and I miss something, whether it's something that's said in the background, whether it's a buzzword my caller's saying that should have made me prompt to ask a different question. They're having a hard time recognizing those things. And when we're talking about developing the radio ear, or even when you're on a 911 call, it seems like having that assistive technology, especially early in your training, when you're already doing so much multitasking that you're not used to, is only going to help you really be able to key in on those words,
Yeah, I want to add one other thing on the workflow, which is we've started to put a lot of concentration on the call handling side too. And that I touched briefly, we've built a language model for Spanish as well, not to translate, but to transcribe, because people would be bilingual, as the call taker.
Yeah.
And that's another stress reducer. And the user experience, as you know, is quite different than a radio dispatch. The vocabularies are different, but there's still some fundamental building blocks, which is there are words that indicate, what help you with the 5 W's and all that, that sort of stuff. And so then also give you some pretty good triage relative to severity and priority. And that can also work on, mental health type of calls like 988 or the like, and working across. And the final thing I'll say about that user experience is, and we've got as a company work to do on this, but we'll be doing it with beta customers later this year on the call side, because we're full production on the radio side, is we will look, it's the classic children's game of whisper down the lane. This was said on the call. Did you lose something down the lane?
Yeah, good old telephone.
Yeah. And so that's, we think there's tremendous potential in that assistive nature of making sure that integrity of the communication is retained through that flow.
Awesome. Man, Roger, I feel like I can talk to you all day about this stuff because it's so interesting, and it's like you said, 17 months young. I mean, it's only going to continue to grow. You guys sound like you're doing some amazing stuff. So, can folks reach out to you to bring you into their centers now, or what does finding you to work with you look like? Where can folks reach out to you?
Yeah, very much so. We are ready to deploy anywhere, and I'd like to mention when we built this, a founding team said we want to be affordable, we want to be easy to integrate. So we, I'll use Flanagan again. He's at Grapevine. He said we pay what we pay for our coffee supply for what we pay for this technology. And that's true. And that might, shock some folks. So yes, we inbound, it would be roger.mann@smartresponsech.com. And that's also Smart Response assistivetech.com is our website, and any of your audience can go to that website and there's a click to go, I want a demonstration, I want more information. You can get it that way as well. And yeah, we're actually one of the deployment sites that's probably either next or, we have a very small backlog that we're, deploying, and we deploy in a day, is actually Sacramento Fire and Rescue, Julie Todd. So
very cool.
Yeah, we're very excited about that. And so you can get the sense we're in small centers. We're, going now into some larger centers. And we're ready. We're excited. We want to do our part on this whole movement across the country that you're part of.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And the question that I ask everybody to wrap it up, and I know you're privy in the first responder world is a little different than maybe someone that I talk to, but what advice would you give someone who is considering a career in public safety, whether it is providing technology to help our first responders or getting into the field and serving in that manner?
My advice, and it's informed more from my last 17 months of experience with leadership, is seek out what I call enlightened leaders. And leaders doesn't necessarily mean they're the director of the center. There's leaders like yourself. Adam Tim is a great book, the people-driven leadership. And you can see the prototypical awesome leader that's a virtuous cycle leader to a better place. The movement is real. It's everywhere. And as you're, look into those places that are embracing that change and those type of leaders and the culture that they're forming, because then you'll have a very, very satisfying career with that virtuous cycle. And you're going to learn and you're going to grow and you're going to be very satisfied with the difference that you're making in the world. So that's my advice is, seek out those types of places that embrace, people, driven leadership. And, they're abundant. You see them, in every state that we've been in, they're there. And so it's a very bright future for public safety with the leadership that is driving a brighter future.
Awesome. Amazing advice. Roger, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for being excited about public safety and creating this company and this tool that we can all add to our tool belt. And I imagine it's going to be in all the centers in no time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Awesome. I'll be right back with you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on another amazing episode on Let's Talk Dispatch. I am really excited about technology and its ability to make our jobs easier and help us save more lives. I mean, that's really all it comes down to. So if you're listening and you're like, Ashley, I don't want another password, I don't want another monitor, understand that these things are being tried out and implemented in our centers only to help us. The growing pain that you're going to feel when implementing any new technology is only going to become the normal way you do this job. So please embrace any new technology that your centers might be trying to implement and give positive, constructive feedback of your experience to your supervisors and to those companies so we can improve this technology, because it's only here to help us and to help the folks who are calling us for help. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, tell a friend, all the good things. And until next time, stay raspy, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let's Talk Dispatch, a Raspy Dispatcher production. If you liked the podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and of course, tell a friend. If you want to be a guest, head to the raspydispatcher.com and check out our additional resources. Until next time, stay raspy, everybody.